Hey guys, tonight we begin with the brutally hot, soot-covered life of a man who quite literally forged the medieval world, the blacksmith. You've probably seen them in movies, hammering glowing iron in slow motion with sparks flying majestically through the air. But trust me, being a real medieval blacksmith was nothing like a dramatic training montage. It was dirty, exhausting, blister-inducing work. And in most cases, it absolutely sucked. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You were born into the noble, soot-covered lineage of medieval blacksmiths. No crowns, no land, no fancy titles. Just the family forge, anvil-shaped blisters, and the scent of roasted iron baked into your baby blanket. From the moment you can walk without tripping into the fire pit, you're expected to help. By age 6, you're officially your father's apprentice, which is a polite medieval way of saying tiny unpaid assistant with zero rights and permanent soot streaks on your face. Your toys, tongs, your playground, a dirt floor next to a furnace hot enough to cook your eyebrows. While other village kids are chasing chickens and skipping stones, you're learning how not to die next to molten metal. Fun games include guess how hot this is with your hand, hold the hammer until your arms fall off, and try not to cry when you mess up the nail again. Your father, the blacksmith, is a terrifying, muscular man whose entire vocabulary consists of sighs, grunts, and the phrase, "hit it harder." He's got hands like tree bark and a permanent scowl etched from decades of smoke exposure and tax collectors. He teaches you everything: how to shape iron, how to fuel the fire, how to keep your mouth shut when a knight insults your work. You don't ask questions. You just observe, absorb, and obey. Mostly because asking questions results in a flying horseshoe and a week of silent treatment. Holidays? Nice idea. You don't get those. The forge doesn't take breaks, and neither do you. Someone always needs something sharpened, fixed, or reforged. You learn quickly that free time is just the time between one job and the next. And while you're technically learning a trade, what you're really learning is pain tolerance, heat resistance, and how to fall asleep standing up. By the time you're 10, you already smell like iron, swear like a miner, and have arms strong enough to carry water buckets that weigh more than your dog, assuming the dog didn't run away from the noise 2 years ago. This is your life now. Welcome to the family business. Hope you like sweat, smoke, and 70 years of back pain. If you thought you'd get a few good years of playtime before the hammer came down, think again. Childhood, in the medieval blacksmith's world, is more of a suggestion than a phase. The moment you can lift a bucket without toppling over, you're drafted. Forget games, toys, or any concept of fun. Your playroom is a smoke-stained shed filled with sharp objects and open flames. Your jungle gym? A rack of tongs next to a pit of glowing coal. One wrong step, and you're getting an unscheduled lesson in how long your skin can sizzle before Dad notices. Your official job title might be apprentice, but what it really means is do everything no one else wants to do and get yelled at anyway. You stoke the fire, pump the bellows, sweep the floor, clean the tools, restack the coal, and try not to get impaled by a falling horseshoe. All before breakfast. You get paid in food, stern nods, and the occasional grunt of mild approval, which in blacksmith language means you didn't completely ruin that today. Meanwhile, the village kids you once knew are out in the fields, maybe throwing sticks or learning how to milk goats. You envy them, even if they do smell like cheese and manure. They might grow up to be farmers or shepherds, humble jobs, sure, but ones that involve fewer glowing weapons and surprise burns. You, on the other hand, are learning to make nails by hand. Nails. Thousands of them. Bent, twisted, and reheated again and again until they're straight enough to hold some lord's chicken coop together. If you're lucky, your father lets you swing a hammer on your own, right after he points out every single thing you're doing wrong. And don't even think about saying, "I'm tired." That phrase doesn't exist in the forge. Fatigue is weakness. Burnout is for candles. You keep swinging, keep sweating, keep smiling, or at least keep from crying where anyone can see. Because in the eyes of your master, who is also your dad, you're not a child anymore. You're a blacksmith in training, and the training never ends. The forge isn't just where you work, it's your entire existence. It dominates your senses, reshapes your muscles, and rewires your brain. By the time you're in your teens, it doesn't just feel like a place. It feels like a living creature, a hot, smoky, temperamental beast that you must feed, control, and fear. You know the sounds by heart. The bellows wheezing, the iron hissing in the water, the sharp clang of hammer on metal echoing like a war drum. There's a rhythm to it, like some brutal medieval symphony, and your body moves in time with it, whether you're awake or half asleep. You stop noticing the heat after a while. That's not because it gets easier, it's because you've simply accepted it, like gravity or taxes. You know which stones get too hot to sit on, which coals burn quickest, and which parts of the floor are secretly trying to murder your feet. Your skin darkens from smoke, not sun. Your clothes, the same soot-stained tunic and leather apron you wear every day, smell like a mix of scorched wool, grease and desperation. You don't own many things, but you do own this forge. Not on paper, mind you. Your father still technically runs it, but in practice, it owns you. You start to forget what silence sounds like. The hiss, the clang, the crackle, it's constant. When the forge does go quiet, it's almost unsettling. You find yourself twitching like you're missing a beat in a song you've been forced to memorize since childhood. Your friends, assuming you've kept any, barely see you. He's probably at the forge becomes your default status. You're not a blacksmith, you are the forge, a two-legged extension of fire and steel, and strangely, a part of you starts to love it. Not the burns, not the blisters, but the feeling when the shape finally comes out right, when the horseshoe fits, when the blade gleams, when the metal bends to your will. For a moment, you're not just a kid covered in soot, you're a creator, a crafter, a necessary gear in the medieval machine. Then the moment passes, the next order arrives, and the fire roars again. Time to get back to work. By the time your friends are just starting to grow into their teenage limbs, yours already feel like they've been through a siege. While they're getting taller and stronger, you're getting stooped, scarred and stiff. Your arms are thick, but not in a heroic knight lifting a sword way, more like teenager who's been repeatedly attacked by anvils. Your back? A tragedy, hunched from hauling metal and leaning over the forge for hours a day. Your knees? They creak when you crouch. Your shoulders pop every time you lift a hammer, which is every few seconds. So now that's just part of your personal soundtrack. And your hands? Let's talk about your hands. You used to have fingers. Now you have iron-tipped claws. They're blistered, cracked and stained with soot so deep, even the Nile couldn't wash it off. Cuts are common, burns are daily, and your fingernails? Half of them are permanently blackened or missing. When someone offers you bread, you hold it with the same delicacy you'd use to cradle a hedgehog made of glass, because every knuckle already feels like it's been cursed. There's no such thing as recovery time. Pull a muscle, keep working. Twist your wrist, use the other one. The forge doesn't care that your elbow is screaming. Iron doesn't wait politely while you rest. And let's not forget sleep. You'd think with a day full of hammering and hauling, you'd pass out easily. But no. Your muscles ache so bad you can't lie still. Your ears are still ringing from 10 hours of clanging. And your arms twitch with phantom swings like you're sparring ghosts in your dreams. You ache in places you didn't know could ache. You smell like pain. Even your pain has pain. And what does your father say about this? Good. You're learning. In a strange way, you are. You're not growing despite the pain. You're growing because of it. You're being hardened like the very metal you work, shaped by heat, pressure, and repetition. But make no mistake, by the time you hit adulthood, Your body feels like it already lived 2 lives and died halfway through both. And the worst part? You're just getting started. In most jobs, smoke is a problem. In your job, it's a co-worker, and a particularly rude one. The forge isn't just hot, it's a choking chamber, and every breath you take comes seasoned with the fine aroma of coal dust, scorched metal, ash, and regret. If you can see clearly more than 6 feet ahead, congratulations. Someone forgot to light the fire. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that leaks more smoke in than it lets out. You try opening a window. There is no window. Just soot-black walls, your father's coughing, and the occasional gust of wind that blows everything into your eyes anyway. Your lungs? Let's just say they've entered a long-term toxic relationship with smoke. At first, it burns. Then it irritates. Then one day, it just becomes normal. Coughing fits. Part of the rhythm. Black mucus. Not ideal, but hey, at least it's consistent. You've reached the point where clean air feels suspicious. Even your voice changes. You start sounding like a 60-year-old goat farmer who drinks boiling tar. Words are scratchier, breaths are shorter, and your throat always feels like it's hosting a dust storm. But you keep working, because you have to. And it's not just the smoke from the fire. There's metal dust from grinding, oil fumes from quenching, and sometimes burnt leather, charred wood, or whatever unfortunate material just dropped into the coals. You've probably inhaled 3 different types of poison before noon. Protective gear? Please. A rag tied around your face is the best you can do. And even that gets sweaty, gross, and somehow smells worse than the smoke itself. You take it off, and suddenly it's a little harder to breathe. But at least you're not gagging on your own sweat. Long-term damage? Of course. Asthma, black lung, early death. All part of the career package. But you're not thinking long-term. You're thinking about finishing that gate hinge before your father notices how crooked it is. In the world of a medieval blacksmith, air is just another burden. You don't breathe to survive. You breathe to keep hammering. By now, you've developed an intimate relationship with your tools, mostly based on pain, necessity, and mutual disrespect. Your hammer, it's basically an extension of your arm. You've named it. You've cursed it. You've swung it so many times that your shoulder now clicks when you raise it, like a haunted maraca. But without it, you're just a sweaty guy standing in a smoke-filled hut. The hammer makes you a blacksmith, and also makes you bleed. Regularly. Then there's your tongs, clumsy, hot, and always pinching you at the exact wrong moment. You've burned your fingertips more times than you've successfully picked up anything. The iron slips. The grip fails. You yell. Your dad tells you to grip it like you mean it. You consider throwing them into the fire just to teach them a lesson. Your chisel? It used to be sharp. Now it's mostly a suggestion of a blade, because you've used it to shape, split, scrape, and occasionally pry open stuck doors when your neighbour's lock breaks. Files, awls, punch tools, rivet sets. Your tool bench looks like a medieval torture rack. And honestly, it kind of is. You've been jabbed, crushed, pinched, sliced, and impaled by every item you own. Your fingers have memory now. They flinch at the mere sight of a new tool. Your apron. It's meant to protect you, and it sort of does. If by protect you mean catch hot metal shards and hold them close to your body like a smouldering hug. It's more scorched than stitched, and the leather stiffens like a corpse every winter. And yet, despite all this, you care for these tools like they're family. You sharpen them, oil them, line them up each night, because if one breaks, you're done. You can't work, you can't earn, you can't eat. No tool, no income. So yes, your tools are your life. But don't be fooled. They've also declared war on your fingers, spine, and sanity. Every day they whisper, "We help you survive, but we'll also slowly destroy you." And you say, "Yeah, that sounds about right." Now pass the hammer. You don't wear a crown, carry a sword, or lead armies, but without you, the village stops functioning by Tuesday. You're the blacksmith, and everyone needs you all the time, for everything. You're the medieval equivalent of customer service, tech support, and roadside assistance rolled into one soot-covered figure who smells like smoke and shame. The knight needs a new sword? You make it. The farmer breaks a plough? You fix it. A monk's bell cracks, a baker's oven door jams, a shepherd's gate latch won't close. Guess who gets called? That's right, you. Every single time. And they all act like you've just been waiting for their problem. They show up unannounced, mid-swing, covered in mud and entitlement. I know you're busy, they say, but could you just? The phrase that haunts you. But here's the best part. You never get thanked. They assume it's your duty, that you were born to serve. If their hoe works, their door closes, or their shield holds, they nod and walk away like you were the lucky one. As if you should be honoured to repair their rusty bucket at sunset for half a loaf of stale bread. Payment? Often inconsistent. Sometimes in coin, sometimes in goods, sometimes in promises they forget by next market day. One man paid you with a dead chicken good for soup. It wasn't. You're also the go-to fixer for problems that don't belong to you. Bent hinges from someone sitting on a gate. You fix it. Broken dagger from a drunk fight. You fix it. Mysterious piece of iron no one can identify, but absolutely must be fixed. Yep, still you. Yet, when the village praises anyone, it's the knight, the priest, or the miller with the extra fat goat. You, your background noise. A necessity. A reliable tool, not a person. But here's the secret. You know. You know they couldn't last a week without your work. Their fields would stall, their homes would fall apart, their horses would limp. And while they may not sing songs about you, their entire world is quietly held together by your hands. You'd think peace would be good news. No raiders, no bandits, no screaming noblemen demanding a new sword by sundown. But for you, peace is terrible for business. Because you, the blacksmith, may work on ploughs and hinges, but what really pays the bills is war. When there's fighting, everyone needs you. Weapons, armour, arrowheads by the hundreds. Even horseshoes wear down faster under the weight of panicked cavalry charges. You're flooded with work, the forge burns brighter, the coins roll in. You may be exhausted, but your belly is full, and your debt to the alehouse, momentarily forgotten. But then the war ends. The local lord declares a truce, the knights stop marching, and suddenly your orders vanish. No more swords, no more helmets, just a farmer asking if you can sharpen a sickle, and maybe accept 3 onions as payment. And sure, you can make household goods, cauldrons, door handles, cooking spits. But there's not much profit in it. Everyone wants you to work like a wizard, but they want to pay you like a stable boy. You become a negotiator, a beggar, and a merchant all at once, haggling for decent wages like your forge is a stall at market, and don't even think about raising your prices. People look at you like you just cursed their cow. But you're just hammering metal, they say, as if molten iron bends itself into shape while singing church hymns. You start to miss the chaos. Not the blood, not the burning villages, but the steady flow of orders, the purpose, the rush. When knights lined up outside your forge with dented shields and coin purses ready, you mattered. Now, you're making keys for locked doors no one locks, patching pots that should have been thrown out, and fixing tools so old they belong in a museum, not a field. Peace, for everyone else, means safety and rest. For you, it means economic anxiety and hunger. And deep down, though you'd never say it out loud, part of you whispers, wouldn't mind a small skirmish. Just a little one. Maybe a minor border dispute. Because when swords break, you eat. Some jobs have an end, a clear finish line, a task completed, followed by rest, applause, or at least a warm bowl of stew. Blacksmithing is not one of those jobs. Your work is never done. Not today, not tomorrow, not even in your dreams. You fix one thing, and 3 more break. Patch a gate hinge? The wheel falls off the cart. Finish a batch of nails? Someone shows up demanding 10 more. But longer this time, and also, I can't pay you until harvest. You rise before the sun and go to sleep long after it disappears behind the trees. And even then, your brain keeps hammering. You dream of bellows, sparks, and that one customer who still owes you a half-dozen eggs and a thank you. Even the quick jobs never are. A villager walks in holding a mangled rake. It just needs a little fixing, they say. But you know. That's 2 hours of reshaping, reheating, hammering, and nodding politely as they ask, "Is it ready yet?" every 5 minutes. And just when you think you can finally sit, maybe drink something that isn't lukewarm and smoky, your apprentice comes running. The farrier's ill. You need to shoe the horse. Of course you do, because you're the blacksmith. And around here, blacksmith means everyone else's last resort. The forge demands attention constantly. The fire won't stoke itself. The tools rust if ignored. Your anvil shifts in the summer heat. Your bellows crack in the winter cold. Everything is either falling apart or threatening to. Even holidays don't stop the work. Sunday is technically a day of rest, unless, of course, someone's ox cart breaks on the way to market. Then suddenly, you're in your apron, half awake, praying the priest doesn't walk by while you're hammering on the Lord's day. You don't keep a to-do list. That implies there's a point when it'll all be crossed off. There isn't. Because blacksmithing isn't a job. It's a cycle. Work, fix, repeat. Until your body gives out, or your hammer does. And the worst part, you kind of love it. You'd think that pounding hot iron all day would earn you at least 2 things, a good meal and a solid night's sleep. Wrong. In the life of a medieval blacksmith, food and rest aren't guaranteed. They're luxuries, like clean water or polite customers. Let's talk food first. You work from sunup to sundown, burning calories like a runaway horse. And what do you get? A piece of coarse bread, a bowl of cold pottage that might contain yesterday's turnip, and maybe, a bit of salted pork if it's a special day, which it isn't. You eat standing up, one hand still clutching tongs, the other shielding your food from the forge's ash. Meals are rushed. Conversations are grunts. And if someone knocks on the door mid-bite because their latch is stuck, guess what? That stew's going cold. You don't eat to enjoy. You eat to survive. Fuel in, hammer out. Now let's talk sleep, or the cruel parody of it. When you finally crawl into bed, your hands are throbbing. Your back feels like it lost a bar fight. And your ears are still ringing from a full day of iron symphonies. Your bed? A straw-stuffed sack that's either too lumpy, too flat, or full of mysterious crawling things. Your blanket. A scorched wool sheet that smells faintly of forge smoke, old ale, and regret. And just as your eyes are closing, your brain remembers that order you forgot to finish. Or that hinge that cracked weird. Or the payment you still haven't received for that wagon wheel 3 weeks ago. Sleep becomes a negotiation. You lie awake, tossing, turning, calculating how long you can delay repairs without someone banging on your door at dawn. And don't forget the midnight surprises. Someone's horse throws a shoe, a storm rips a door off its hinges, or a noble's sword urgently needs sharpening before a hunt. Because obviously, you don't need rest. You learn to survive on scraps and snatches, stolen bites, half naps, and sheer stubbornness. Because in your world, productivity comes before nourishment, deadlines before dozing. Food and sleep aren't breaks from the job. They're intermissions between hammer swings. You'll eat when you can, sleep when you're allowed, and hope the fire doesn't go out while you're dreaming. There was a time when your hands were soft. Once. Long ago. Maybe as a child. Now, they're ruined. Your fingers have become tools themselves, stiff, swollen, cracked, and calloused to the point where they barely feel anything except when it hurts. You can't hold a quill. You can barely lace your own boots. But you can grab red-hot tongs with the casual confidence of someone who's been burned so often, pain has lost its meaning. Every joint in your hands pops when you move. Your knuckles look like they've been mugged by a hammer. Your palms are a map of blisters, old, new, layered like tree rings. Need to figure out what season it is? Just check the blister count. More than 5. It's summer. You've lost fingernails. More than once. Some came off clean. Others didn't. You once crushed your thumb so badly it turned black for 2 weeks. You didn't stop working. You just switched hands and grunted more than usual. Cuts are constant. Sometimes it's a chipped edge. Sometimes a file bites you. Sometimes the iron fights back. Every week something leaks blood. You wrap it in a scrap of cloth, curse under your breath, and keep working. Worse still are the burns. Some are mild, little reminders that iron doesn't forgive. Others are worse, the kind that sizzle, bubble, and leave scars that tell their own stories. You've branded yourself more times than a cattle farmer, and at this point, you're not even mad about it. You're just used to it. Your grip strength is the only thing that's improved. You can crush walnuts like they owe you money. But dexterity, that's gone. You drop things. Your fingers shake when cold. You're 30 and have the hands of a 70-year-old knight who lost 3 wars and now plays tavern dice for soup. But despite it all, these hands are what keep you alive. They shape swords, fix hinges, and hold the hammer that holds your reputation. They hurt constantly, but they work. Because in this life, it doesn't matter how broken your body is, as long as you can still swing. Let's be honest, you don't smell great. Actually, you haven't smelled clean since you were 5. The moment you became your father's apprentice, your personal fragrance took a permanent turn toward unwashed ashtray mixed with burnt bacon and desperation. Welcome to blacksmith life, where no matter how hard you scrub, you smell like fire. Forever. The forge burns all day, and so do you. The smoke seeps into your clothes, your hair, your skin. Your sweat doesn't even smell like regular sweat anymore. It's more like smoked meat left out during a warm spring. You could bathe, in theory. But baths are rare, water is cold, and you're working 6 days a week, covered in soot, grease, and coal dust, before the sun's even fully up. So what's the point? You'd be filthy again by breakfast. Your clothes are no help. You wear the same singed tunic and scorched leather apron every day. They haven't been truly clean since the last festival, and even then, someone spilled ale on them before noon. Now, they just sort of hang on your body like a protective layer of hardened funk. You try perfume? Forget it. It lasts 10 minutes before the forge eats it alive. Flowers wilt near you. Bread goes stale faster. Cats hiss when you pass. And the worst part? People notice. You walk into the tavern and the crowd parts like the Red Sea. The innkeeper already knows to seat you in the corner, near a window if possible. Not out of courtesy, but survival. No one wants to share a bench with the human embodiment of a burnt fence post. Still, you take it in stride. A little shame is better than going unnoticed. You're known. People say, "That's the blacksmith," with a mix of respect and nasal discomfort. You may not be the most charming man in town, but you're definitely the most aromatic. Besides, smelling like fire means you've been working. Smelling like iron means you've been crafting. And smelling like sweat-soaked leather dipped in soot and regret? Well, that just means you're a professional. You didn't choose this life. The forge chose you, through your father's calloused hands, and the iron expectations passed down like a rusty heirloom. And now, you're doing the same. Your son doesn't play with wooden swords or run wild through the fields. He fetches coal, pumps the bellows, holds the tongs steady while sparks rain down and you mutter, "Don't flinch." He's maybe 7, but already smells like burnt metal and wet burlap. You feel a bit guilty, but only a bit. Because you're not being cruel. You're preparing him. This is the trade. This is survival. He watches you swing the hammer, and you see the way he stares. Wide-eyed, half in awe, half in fear. You remember that look. It's the same one you used to give your father. back when he seemed like a mountain. Now you understand he wasn't made of stone, just exhaustion and responsibility. You teach the boy everything. How to gauge heat by colour, how to tap, not slam, how to listen to the metal. You shout sometimes, more out of habit than anger. Hold it right. That's too cold. Don't cry, it's only a burn. You try to soften things when you can. A story by the fire, a piece of dried fruit when you can afford it. But tenderness doesn't last long in the forge. There's too much work to do. His hands will soon look like yours. His back will ache before his voice cracks. He'll learn to sleep through ringing ears and wake up before sunrise without being told. He'll outgrow his shirt, but not the burn marks. And when you finally fall apart, knees, shoulders, lungs, he'll carry the hammer you can no longer lift. People might say it's unfair, that the cycle should end. But this is how it's always been. A lineage of soot, steel, and survival. You're not just passing down a trade, you're passing down a legacy, a forge that never cools. So yes, you raise your son to do it all again. Not because you're cruel, but because someone has to keep the fire going. You've spent a lifetime standing too close to fire, swinging too much iron, and breathing too little clean air. It was never a question of if your body would fail, just when. And now, it's happening. Your knees creak like wooden doors in a storm. Your back refuses to straighten. Your fingers, once strong enough to bend steel, now tremble when you lift a cup. The forge still roars, but your arms won't answer. The hammer feels heavier every day, as if it knows it's nearly time to leave your grip. You don't go out in a blaze of glory. There's no heroic finale, no ballad. You simply slow down. You start handing tasks to your son. You sit more, watch more. He asks you questions, and for the first time, you struggle to remember the answers. The villagers start going to him now. They still nod respectfully when they pass you, but they talk to your boy. He's the one with the calloused hands now. The burns are fresh on him. The ache of the craft has shifted to new shoulders, and quietly, you're proud. You were never wealthy. You never owned land or books or fine clothes, but you were necessary. You kept swords sharp, wheels turning, gates swinging, and farms working. The world didn't thank you often, but it moved because of you. You likely won't see 50. Most blacksmiths don't. The damage piles up, lungs blackened from years of smoke, joints ground down like iron on stone, heart worn out from constant heat and effort. But when you're gone, your work stays. Nails in church doors, blades at noble hips, horses shod and ready to ride. You leave behind no titles, just tools, scars, and a son with a hammer. And that, in your world, is enough. They may bury you in a simple grave, no gold, no statue. Just a name carved in wood, and a forge that still burns in your memory. But every clang that echoes through the village long after you're gone, that's the sound of you, still working. You were never a knight. You didn't ride into battle with banners flying or wear polished armour that caught the sunlight. But you made that armour. You didn't farm the land, but you made the ploughs that carved it. You didn't bake the bread, but you forged the oven doors. You didn't build the castle, but every nail in its beams, every hinge on its gates, they were touched by your fire. You were a blacksmith. And in the medieval world, that meant everything. While nobles argued and kings changed crowns, you stood by your forge, day in, day out, shaping the world piece by piece. 1,000 small things, rivets, hooks, braces, buckles, nothing that draws a crowd, everything that holds the world together. Your life was loud, but your legacy is quiet. No one wrote songs about your hammer, no bard praised your tongs, but every working wheel, every unbroken sword, every barn door that swings instead of falling, that was you. People walked past your forge and saw smoke. They smelled sweat and soot and assumed that was all. But inside? Inside was a symphony of heat and steel, of creation and endurance. You didn't just forge iron, you forged civilization. One horseshoe, one blade, one nail at a time. And now, long after your hands have gone still, the fire continues. Your son lifts your hammer. Your grandson learns the heat. Your name might fade from memory, but the tools you built carry on, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. You were never crowned, never honoured, never celebrated. But without you, nothing moved. No carts rolled, no armies marched, no homes were secured. You were the foundation beneath the history books, the ember glowing beneath the stories of kings. And that matters more than anyone ever said aloud. Because in a world made of wood, stone and willpower, you were the fire, the silent spark that turned raw ore into progress. You weren't just part of the world, you kept it turning. Long before alchemy was associated with secretive European laboratories and robed mystics whispering over bubbling flasks, it was something far more sacred and far more ancient. Its true origin lies not in medieval Europe, but in the shimmering heat of ancient Egypt, where transformation wasn't a trick of science, but a divine principle etched into every corner of life and death. The ancient Egyptians had a word for it, chemia. Derived from chem, meaning black land, it referred to the dark, fertile soil left behind by the annual flooding of the Nile. But this wasn't just a poetic nickname for their geography. It held deep spiritual meaning. To the Egyptians, black was the colour of potential, of richness, of raw matter waiting to be transformed. And so, the land of Egypt itself became a metaphor for the transformative power of nature. This is where the word alchemy, alchemia, would eventually be born. But alchemy in Egypt wasn't just about turning base metals into gold. That obsession came later. For the ancient Egyptians, alchemy was everywhere. It was in the ritual of mummification, where the body of the dead was carefully preserved, transfigured, and prepared for eternity. It was in the temples, where priests blended oils, herbs, and minerals into sacred elixirs. It was in the stars, in the soil, in the very act of cooking bread and brewing beer. Transformation, they believed, was the language of the gods. In fact, Egyptian alchemy was never purely physical, it was spiritual at its core. To change something outwardly, you first had to understand it inwardly. This idea would echo through the centuries in alchemical texts from all cultures. Some legends say that these early Egyptian alchemists were guided by a divine figure, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, magic, and the moon. According to lore, Thoth revealed the secrets of creation, transformation, and the soul's journey beyond death. These secrets, it was said, were written on a mystical object known as the Emerald Tablet. But before we get to that, we have to recognize one truth. Alchemy began not as a quest for gold, but as a sacred science of life. In Egypt, it was the fire that gave rise to all others, and everything that came after, from Persia to Paris, would trace its roots back to this ancient fertile land. If ancient Egypt was the birthplace of alchemy, then Thoth was its divine midwife. In Egyptian mythology, Thoth wasn't just a god. He was the god of knowledge, magic, writing, time, and the very laws of the universe. With the head of an ibis and a moon disk above him, Thoth stood for equilibrium. And in a world obsessed with order and transformation, he was the sacred scribe of all hidden truths. According to myth, Thoth didn't just teach alchemy, he embodied it. The Egyptians believed he had authored thousands of books filled with divine wisdom. Most of these were never meant for mortal eyes. But one fragment of his knowledge would change history: the mysterious Emerald Tablet. Whispers of the Emerald Tablet have echoed through time like a riddle carved into the bones of civilization. Said to be inscribed in green crystal or emerald stone, the tablet was a short, poetic text, barely a dozen lines long. Yet those lines were believed to hold the ultimate key to transforming matter, spirit, and reality itself. It begins with a sentence that has haunted thinkers for centuries. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This simple line, the principle of correspondence, suggests that the microcosm and the macrocosm are mirrors. What happens in the heavens happens within the human soul. What changes in the lab echoes in the cosmos. The Emerald Tablet didn't hand out instructions for making gold. It handed out a worldview. It said, "The world is not fixed. Everything can be refined, elevated, transmuted. Not just lead into gold, but ignorance into wisdom, chaos into harmony, the mortal into the divine." The tablet also speaks of the one thing, the source of all creation, and how it rises from the earth and descends from the sky, carrying the power of all things in its wake. Many saw this one thing as the philosopher's stone, others as the soul, the ether, or even consciousness itself. But perhaps the greatest mystery wasn't the content of the tablet, but who could understand it. You had to be more than a scholar. You had to be a seeker. And it was this sacred riddle, gifted by Thoth, that would survive the fall of Egypt and pass like a torch across borders and ages. First to Persia, then to the world. As Egypt's golden age faded, alchemy did not vanish. It migrated. Travelling along trade routes carried by scribes, mystics, and conquerors, it passed into the hands of another ancient empire, Persia. But this was not merely a transfer of knowledge. In Persia, alchemy underwent a transformation of its own, one that blended spiritual fire with philosophical depth. The backbone of Persian alchemical thought was deeply shaped by Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest monotheistic religions. At its heart was the concept of duality, a constant battle between light and darkness, truth and falsehood, purity and corruption. Fire, the purest of all elements in Zoroastrian belief, wasn't just a symbol, it was sacred. It burned in temples, representing divine wisdom, and that fire would light the crucibles of early Persian alchemists. But while spiritual ideas burned bright, it was a Greek-Egyptian mystic named Zosimos of Panopolis who gave alchemy its first real voice, one that still echoes today. Living in Roman Egypt around the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimos was no ordinary philosopher. His writings fused technical descriptions of furnaces, stills, and elixirs with strange visionary journeys. In his most famous dream, he sees himself dismembered, burned, and transformed in an alchemical furnace. But rather than horror, this vision is divine. It's the symbolic death of the self, the purification of the soul. Zosimos didn't think alchemy was just about changing metals. He believed the alchemist must themselves be transformed. Just as base matter must be broken down before becoming gold, the alchemist had to suffer, purify, and transcend. In his words, alchemy was a mystery of spirit and matter alike. He introduced the idea of spiritual alchemy, a concept far ahead of his time. Zosimos's writings are full of strange symbols: lions devouring serpents, men melting into coloured vapours, divine beings emerging from fire. These weren't chemical notes, they were metaphors for the soul's journey toward perfection. Zosimos was also one of the first to stress that true knowledge couldn't be bought or memorized. It had to be earned. The path of the alchemist was a path of discipline, suffering, and revelation. His influence would ripple across centuries and continents. And though many of his texts were lost or misunderstood, one thing was clear. Alchemy was no longer just a proto-science. It had become a sacred philosophy. As the embers of ancient knowledge flickered across the remnants of Egypt, Greece, and Persia, a new empire rose, and with it, a golden age of wisdom. Under the banner of Islam, from the 8th to the 13th century, a vast intellectual renaissance began. While Europe descended into the Dark Ages, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became sanctuaries for philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and alchemy. At the heart of this revival stood a man whose name would become legend, Jabir ibn Hayyan, known in the West as Geber. More than a chemist, more than a philosopher, Jabir was a fusion of both. Often called the father of chemistry, his contributions to alchemy were so profound that they laid the foundation for modern science itself. Working in the courts of the Abbasid Caliphate in the 8th century, Jabir approached alchemy not as mysticism, but as a structured, testable discipline. He introduced laboratory methods still recognizable today: distillation, crystallization, sublimation. He invented new instruments, refined acids, and wrote over 100 texts, blending philosophy with chemical experimentation. But he didn't abandon the spiritual roots of the craft. Far from it. Jabir believed that everything in the universe was composed of combinations of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water, and infused with spiritual qualities. His system added a complex blend of numerology, astrology, and symbolism. In his view, every transformation in the material world mirrored a deeper transformation in the soul. Jabir also introduced the idea of balance, or mizan, as the key to alchemy. Just as the body must be balanced to remain healthy, so must metals be balanced to attain perfection. Gold was not simply a metal, it was matter in perfect equilibrium, and if balance could be achieved through careful processes, then even the basest metal could be elevated. His influence didn't stay within Islamic borders. Over time, Jabir's texts were translated into Latin and circulated throughout medieval Europe, igniting a wave of Western alchemists who would build upon his teachings, often without even realizing they were standing on the shoulders of a Persian genius. Through Jabir ibn Hayyan, alchemy took its most decisive step forward. It was no longer just sacred symbolism. It was a method, a system, a science. And yet, it remained what it had always been: a map to transformation, both material and divine. As the Islamic world preserved and expanded the knowledge of the ancients, Europe remained cloaked in superstition and spiritual rigidity. But knowledge has a way of travelling, especially when it's too powerful to be contained. Slowly, piece by piece, alchemy made its way westward, smuggled through language, ink, and conquest. The bridge between East and West was built in places like Alexandria, once home to the Great Library, and later Toledo and Córdoba in Islamic Spain, or Al-Andalus. Here, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked side by side in rare moments of intellectual harmony. Translators toiled over Arabic manuscripts, decoding the works of Jabir, Zosimos, and Aristotle, breathing forgotten ideas back into Europe. By the 12th century, Europe was starving for knowledge. The rediscovery of these ancient texts, especially on alchemy, was nothing short of a cultural detonation. But what arrived wasn't the practical science of chemistry alone. It was alchemy in its fullest form, a fusion of spirit, matter, and meaning. Monasteries began hiding strange manuscripts behind sacred scripture. Monks experimented with metals not just to purify them, but to purify themselves. And in hidden chambers and candlelit studies, European minds began to obsess over one idea: transmutation. The notion that base metals could become gold, and that the human soul could do the same. One of the most influential texts to reach Europe was the Turba Philosophorum, or Assembly of the Philosophers, a mysterious dialogue among ancient sages discussing the secrets of nature. Then came the Picatrix, a massive Arabic grimoire filled with astrological and alchemical symbolism. These works didn't just pass on recipes, they carried worldviews, and those worldviews planted seeds in curious minds. The Latin translations of these texts circulated quietly, often disguised as religious or philosophical treatises to avoid accusations of heresy. After all, alchemy posed a threat. It challenged the fixed order of things. If lead could become gold, could a peasant become noble? Could man become divine? The church watched with suspicion, but alchemy's allure was too strong. It offered a hidden path to perfection, outside of dogma, outside of authority. By the late Middle Ages, Europe had taken the torch. The flame that once burned in Egypt, Persia, and Baghdad now flickered in castles, monasteries, and secret societies. Alchemy had crossed the threshold, and it was about to evolve again. By the late Middle Ages, alchemy in Europe had transformed into something almost mythic. It was no longer just an intellectual pursuit, it was a holy quest. And at the heart of that quest lay one object, one idea, one obsession: the philosopher's stone. The stone wasn't just a chemical substance, it was a mystery wrapped in allegory, hidden in symbols and cloaked in riddles. Said to have the power to transmute base metals into gold and grant immortality through the elusive elixir of life, the philosopher's stone became the most sought-after artifact in Western esoteric tradition. But to those who truly understood alchemy, the stone was not physical, it was spiritual. In alchemical manuscripts it went by many names: lapis philosophorum, the red stone, the powder of projection. Some claimed it was a literal red crystalline substance. Others insisted it was a metaphor for spiritual awakening. But all agreed, it was the key to ultimate transformation. Alchemists believed the universe itself was a living organism constantly striving toward perfection. Metals, too, were alive, growing slowly in the womb of the earth. Lead was simply immature gold, and just as nature evolved toward balance, man could evolve as well. The philosopher's stone was the accelerant of that evolution. European alchemists like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and later Paracelsus devoted their lives to understanding the processes of nature in pursuit of this ultimate truth. They built furnaces, studied astrology, collected rare minerals, and wrote cryptic texts filled with serpents, suns, dragons, and kings, all metaphors for the stages of inner and outer transformation. The stone's creation was said to follow a path called the magnum opus, or great work. It began with nigredo, the blackening, symbolic of death, decay, and the breaking down of ego. Then came albedo, the whitening, purification. Then citrinitas, the yellowing, illumination. And finally, rubedo, the reddening, rebirth, and the emergence of the stone. But why hide this process in metaphor? Because true transformation, alchemists believed, wasn't meant for the uninitiated. The stone would reveal itself only to those who were ready, not just intellectually, but spiritually. To seek the stone was to seek perfection. And while many searched for gold, the wisest alchemists knew the only thing worth perfecting was the soul. As alchemy took deeper root in medieval Europe, it began to slip into the shadows. What was once open dialogue in temples and scholarly exchanges in courts now became hidden practice. The reasons were many: religious scrutiny, political fear, and the simple fact that alchemy's language had become a secret code, decipherable only to the initiated. The Church, wielding enormous power, saw in alchemy both promise and danger. While some Christian mystics embraced it, seeing the transmutation of metals as a mirror of Christ's resurrection, others condemned it. The idea that man could manipulate nature, even achieve spiritual ascension outside of divine grace, was heretical. To avoid persecution, alchemists cloaked their teachings in allegory and symbolism. Thus began an era where alchemy went underground, hiding in secret societies, coded manuscripts, and obscure symbols that only insiders could interpret. The Rosicrucians, a mysterious brotherhood that surfaced in the 17th century, claimed to hold ancient alchemical wisdom passed down from Egypt and Arabia. Their manifestos spoke of spiritual enlightenment, divine harmony, and the hidden sciences. Though no one could prove their existence, their ideas spread like wildfire, inspiring generations of seekers. Then there were the Freemasons, whose roots trace back to stone builders, but whose rituals echo deeply with alchemical philosophy: purification, transformation, inner light. Whether or not they practiced alchemy in the literal sense, their symbolic language aligned perfectly with its aims: the building of the perfect self. Alchemy also found refuge in books of secrets, texts like the Mutus Liber, which contained no words, only a series of strange, symbolic images meant to communicate the great work without uttering a single sentence. Other manuscripts were written in green language, a form of wordplay, puns, and poetic double meanings that concealed their deeper truth. The alchemist's life had become one of duality, outwardly a scholar, physician, or monk, quiet, obedient, inwardly a revolutionary, chasing the divine through fire and metal, spirit and stone. The very secrecy that threatened alchemy also preserved it. Like a fire buried beneath ash, it smouldered unseen, passed down from master to apprentice, generation to generation. And in these quiet shadows, alchemy continued to evolve, not just as an early science, but as a living philosophy. One that would soon encounter its greatest challenge, the birth of modern chemistry. By the 17th and 18th centuries, a quiet revolution was brewing, one that would both inherit and bury the legacy of alchemy. The Age of Enlightenment had arrived. The mysticism and metaphor that once cloaked alchemical thought were no longer welcomed in scholarly halls. In their place came a new language, empiricism, logic, and repeatable results. Alchemy's successor had arrived. Its name was chemistry. This wasn't an abrupt execution. It was a slow, methodical transformation. Many of the earliest chemists were, in fact, alchemists. They simply shifted focus. The goal was no longer spiritual perfection or the transmutation of souls, but measurable change. No more dragons and black suns, just beakers, balances, and precise documentation. One of the final nails in the coffin came with Robert Boyle, often called the father of modern chemistry. In his 1661 book, The Skeptical Chemist, Boyle argued that matter was made up of atoms and that chemical reactions could be explained without mystical forces. He didn't mock alchemy, but he stripped it of its esoteric language. Boyle believed in the alchemist's power to transform, but insisted it must be explained through natural laws, not allegory. Soon after, Antoine Lavoisier would discover the role of oxygen in combustion and disprove the ancient theory of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The periodic table would follow. Laboratories became secular temples of knowledge. Alchemy, with its hidden codes and sacred metaphors, was seen as outdated, an embarrassment to real science. But here's the paradox. Chemistry owed its very existence to alchemy. The tools, the techniques, the curiosity, it all came from the furnace of that ancient craft. Alchemy had walked so that chemistry could run. Still, the world was changing. Industrialization demanded results, not riddles. Governments funded laboratories, not lodges. The philosopher's stone was replaced by the microscope, the alembic by the Bunsen burner. What was once sacred had become material. Yet, not all was lost. In hidden corners and quiet minds, alchemy still breathed. Not as a science, but as a symbol of transformation, of unity, of the eternal dance between matter and spirit. And while the world turned to chemistry for answers, some still looked to alchemy for meaning. Because some fires never go out. They just burn beneath the surface. Alchemy may have vanished from the halls of science, but it never truly died. Instead, it transformed, just as it always taught that all things must. What began in the tombs of Egypt, refined in the fire temples of Persia, and encoded in the hidden texts of medieval Europe, didn't simply disappear. It evolved, splintering into chemistry, psychology, medicine, and even modern spirituality. Its outward form was shed, but its inner message endured. In the 20th century, a new kind of alchemist emerged, not with a furnace, but with a notebook and a mind full of dreams. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, rediscovered the hidden wisdom of alchemy and gave it new life. He argued that the ancient alchemists weren't just transforming metals, they were unconsciously mapping the human psyche. The blackening, nigredo, was depression. The whitening, albedo, was insight. The reddening, rubedo, was the birth of a unified self. The philosopher's stone, Jung said, was individuation, the process of becoming whole. Alchemy, it turned out, had always been about more than gold. Today, we see its fingerprints everywhere, in self-help books preaching transformation, in stories of heroes who descend into darkness to return reborn. In the very language we use, words like refine, distill, purify, all echoes of the alchemist's path. Even in science, the spirit of alchemy lingers. Chemists still transmute elements in nuclear reactors. Physicists speak of dark matter and unified fields, with the same wonder alchemists once had for ether and quintessence. The search for the fundamental building blocks of the universe continues, only the language has changed. But perhaps the true legacy of alchemy lies in its insistence on wholeness. It never separated spirit from matter, or science from mystery. It taught that the transformation of the world begins with the transformation of the self, that behind every experiment was a sacred question. Who are you becoming in the process? In a world driven by speed, by technology, by the cold precision of data, alchemy whispers an ancient truth, that to change anything truly, you must also be willing to change yourself. And so, the alchemist's fire still burns, not in crucibles, but in hearts, waiting, calling, transforming. Because alchemy was never just a science, it was a mirror. At first glance, Cappadocia seems like a surreal painting. Its surface dotted with towering stone chimneys and rippling ridges carved by wind and time. Tourists marvel at the strange beauty above, but what most never realize is that the real wonder lies beneath their feet. Deep under this Turkish landscape is a forgotten world, a labyrinth of subterranean cities stretching for miles. These aren't simple caves or makeshift shelters. They're entire urban complexes hidden underground, complete with residences, chapels, wells, food storage, stables, and even schools. Some go down as far as 18 stories, housing thousands of people in the shadows of the earth. The most astonishing part? Many of these cities were completely unknown until the mid-20th century. In 1963, a man renovating his home in the town of Derinkuyu knocked down a wall in his basement. What he found behind it wasn't brick or dirt, it was a tunnel. That tunnel led to another, then to a chamber, then to a spiral staircase. He had accidentally uncovered an ancient entrance to one of the largest underground cities in the world. It was as if an entire civilization had chosen to vanish beneath the ground, leaving behind no sign except silence. But Derinkuyu was just one of many. Over the decades, archaeologists have identified hundreds of underground settlements throughout Cappadocia, at least 40 major ones, interconnected through narrow corridors and secret escape routes. These weren't random burrows. They were deliberately planned and engineered. Massive stone doors could seal off passageways from the inside. Ventilation shafts brought fresh air from the surface. Wells tapped into underground aquifers, ensuring fresh water even under siege. Why would anyone build something so elaborate under the earth? That question has haunted historians for years. Theories abound. Were these cities hiding spots from invading armies? Monastic refuges? Secret spiritual sanctuaries? Or were they something far older, far stranger? Whatever the reason, one thing is clear. Cappadocia wasn't just a region, it was a refuge. A world beneath a world. A place where thousands could disappear from the surface and live their lives entirely underground. And the deeper you go into these cities, the stranger the story becomes. To understand why people built cities beneath Cappadocia, we first need to understand the land itself. Because Cappadocia is no ordinary terrain. Millions of years ago, a series of violent volcanic eruptions buried central Turkey under layers of ash. That ash hardened into a soft, porous rock known as tuff, a material light enough to carve with basic tools, yet strong enough to hold its shape over centuries. Rain and wind shaped it into strange formations. Fairy chimneys, conical towers, mushroom-like spires. The entire region looked like something torn from a dream, or a different planet. But ancient people didn't just marvel at the rock, they worked with it. early settlers realized that this volcanic stone was a gift. They could carve out homes, chapels, storage rooms, even entire complexes without lumber or bricks. And unlike surface dwellings, these stone chambers stayed cool in the scorching summers and warm during freezing winters. Above ground, they carved churches into cliff faces. But below ground, that's where the real magic happened. It likely began with simple caves, small hideaways to store food, to escape heat, or to shelter from storms. But over time, as threats grew and communities expanded, those caves grew too. They evolved into interconnected rooms, then levels, then networks. And once the digging started, it didn't stop. Entire societies vanished beneath the soil, carving deeper and deeper, not randomly, but with intention. Tunnels connected homes to kitchens, stables to wells, rooms to chapels. They created ventilation shafts that reached the surface and filtered fresh air through multiple stories. They even dug vertical staircases wide enough for people and livestock, yet narrow enough to defend. What's truly incredible is how ancient these structures may be. While many underground cities were expanded during the Byzantine era, some archaeologists believe that the original levels, especially in places like Derinkuyu and Kaymaklı, could date back to the Hittite Empire, or even earlier, around 2000 BCE. This land invited transformation, and the people of Cappadocia responded by shaping it, not with machines but with patience, vision, and survival in mind. The earth wasn't just a foundation, it was a shelter, a fortress, a second sky, only inverted and filled with secrets. But what exactly were they hiding from? That's the question we explore next. Beneath the quiet town of Derinkuyu lies something extraordinary. A city, not above the earth, but deep beneath it. A city that no one even knew existed until 1963, when a man doing simple renovations in his home knocked down a wall and found a dark tunnel stretching beyond sight. That tunnel led to chambers. The chambers led to corridors. Staircases spiraled downward into the rock, leading from room to room, level to level, until eventually explorers found themselves standing 18 stories beneath the surface. They had uncovered Derinkuyu, the largest and deepest underground city ever found in Cappadocia, and possibly the world. What archaeologists found was staggering. This wasn't a temporary hideout or an emergency shelter. Derinkuyu was a living city, carved entirely out of volcanic stone. It had homes, churches, communal kitchens, wine and oil presses, storage rooms, schools, and even a baptismal chamber. It could house an estimated 20,000 people, along with their livestock and food supplies. It was engineered with remarkable precision. Massive rolling stone doors, shaped like millstones, could be pushed to seal off tunnels in case of attack. These weren't simple blocks. They were perfectly fitted, movable from the inside, and nearly impossible to force open from the outside. Ventilation shafts snaked upward through the rock, delivering fresh air to the deepest levels. Wells accessed underground aquifers to provide water without surfacing. There was even a mission school, complete with study rooms, suggesting that this city wasn't just about survival. It was about continuity, teaching, worship, community. But here's what makes Derinkuyu so mysterious. We don't really know who first built it, or why. Some believe it was expanded by early Christians fleeing Roman or Arab persecution. Others argue the foundations are far older, perhaps dating back to the Phrygians, or even the Hittites, thousands of years before Christ. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to disappear underground? Was it to escape invaders, as many believe? Or was the threat not human at all? Derinkuyu holds no inscriptions, no names, no definitive timeline. Just rooms, tunnels, and questions. And even today, much of it remains unexplored. Because the deeper you go, the less it feels like a city, and the more it feels like something else. To build downward is far more complex than building up. There's no sunlight, no scaffolding, no wide open skies. just solid stone and shadow. And yet, the architects of Cappadocia's underground cities didn't just dig, they designed with remarkable intelligence and precision, creating spaces that could support thousands of lives for months, maybe even years at a time. These cities weren't chaotic tunnels burrowed in panic. They were carefully planned systems, layered like an onion, each level with a distinct purpose. Living quarters were closer to the surface, allowing quicker access to the outside when danger passed. Deeper levels housed kitchens, workshops, food storage, and livestock pens, strategically placed to reduce the risk of contamination or fire spreading through the city. One of the most ingenious features was the ventilation system. Long vertical shafts were carved through the rock to allow air to circulate through as many as 18 underground levels. Some shafts were over 50 meters deep, yet so well placed that fresh air could reach even the lowest chambers. Without fans, without electricity, just gravity and brilliant design. Water was another key to survival. The cities were built around natural aquifers. Wells could be accessed from within, ensuring that even in a siege, residents wouldn't need to emerge for water. In some cities, the well shafts were sealed off from the surface entirely to prevent poisoning by attackers. There were communication tunnels too, some leading to smaller satellite chambers, others connecting to nearby underground cities. In times of danger, messages or people could be moved through the earth itself. And the defense mechanisms were both simple and effective. Narrow corridors that forced invaders to approach single file. Trapdoors that could be dropped. Hidden escape routes leading into valleys or riverbeds. Most famously, the rolling stone doors. Massive, round slabs that could be rolled into place to seal off a passage in seconds. From the outside, they looked like part of the wall. From the inside, they were a last line of defense. Every decision, every design, pointed to one truth. These cities were built for survival, not for days, not for weeks, but for long-term habitation under extreme threat. Which raises the question, what kind of danger required this level of preparation? And was it ever truly gone? For centuries, scholars have asked the same haunting question. Who were the people of Cappadocia hiding from? What kind of threat drove entire populations to dig into the earth, not just for shelter, but to live? The most common theory points to invaders. Central Anatolia was a crossroads of empires. From the Assyrians to the Persians, from the Romans to the Byzantines, the region was constantly under threat. Later, Arab raids during the early Islamic period would push Christian communities to seek refuge underground. Derinkuyu and Kaymaklı may have become sanctuaries during these waves of violence, allowing people to disappear into the rock and wait for danger to pass. But there's a problem. The depth, complexity, and sheer scale of these underground cities suggest they weren't built in a rush. This wasn't a desperate act, it was a long-term plan, requiring generations of digging, engineering, and refinement. Some of the deepest chambers appear to predate Christianity entirely. So who built the first layers? Some historians trace the earliest tunnels back to the Hittite Empire, nearly 4,000 years ago. Others suggest the Phrygians may have expanded them. But beyond these educated guesses, the record grows silent. There are no inscriptions, no carvings, no direct evidence telling us who first vanished beneath the surface, or what they were running from. That's where the theories begin. Some believe these cities were built not to escape other people, but something else. Natural disasters, solar events, even ancient warfare that may have scarred the skies and poisoned the land. More fringe theories go deeper, suggesting that the cities were built to hide from beings, not of this world. The kind of beings spoken of in myths across cultures. Sky gods, watchers, destroyers. The idea is tempting. If you look at the level of secrecy, the air shafts disguised from view, the escape routes, the stone doors. It almost feels like the builders were trying to disappear completely, as if whatever they feared didn't just attack, it hunted. While these ideas remain speculative, they reflect a central mystery. No matter how many layers archaeologists uncover, the core question remains unanswered. Who were they hiding from? And did it work? Because sometimes the deeper you dig, the darker the truth becomes. Imagine living not just a day, but months, maybe even years, entirely underground. No sunlight, no open skies, just stone walls, flickering oil lamps, and the ever-present hush of life beneath the earth. This was reality for thousands in Cappadocia during times of threat. But what did daily life actually look like inside these vast underground cities? Despite the darkness, these spaces weren't lifeless. They were alive with routine, carefully structured for communal survival. Families lived in multi-room compartments. Kitchens were located on lower levels to manage smoke more efficiently, and food was cooked in clay ovens. The scent of baked bread likely mixed with the damp smell of stone and livestock. There were churches and chapels, carved with crosses and altars, some even containing intricate frescoes. People didn't just survive here. They prayed, worshipped, and practiced rituals. There were communal areas for meetings, schooling rooms for children, and long corridors that echoed with voices and footsteps. Lighting came from oil lamps, dozens of them scattered along the passageways. Smoke was channeled through cleverly designed shafts that doubled as ventilation. Yet, life here wasn't easy. Fresh air was limited. Darkness was constant, and silence, when it fell, was absolute. Water was drawn from deep wells tunneled into aquifers. Grain was stored in sealed chambers to prevent spoilage. Wine presses and olive oil vats have been found carved into the rock, suggesting that even underground, life had flavour and ritual. The cities were built for the long haul. They weren't a last resort, they were a prepared reality. Livestock, sheep, goats, chickens, were kept in dedicated pens, usually near the entrance levels for easier management and ventilation. Their presence served a dual purpose: food and warmth. Despite the confined spaces, the builders understood the psychology of survival. Rooms were laid out in ways that gave families privacy, while shared spaces created a sense of community. Life underground wasn't just about hiding. It was about preserving a way of life, a culture, and a people. It's a humbling thought. While wars raged above, entire civilizations continued below, hidden in silence. People married, taught their children, mourned their dead, all within stone chambers lit by fire. To live underground was not to live in fear. It was to live with intention. Cappadocia's underground cities weren't isolated pockets of refuge. They were part of something much bigger. Beneath the valleys and hills of this volcanic region lies a vast network of tunnels, chambers, and hidden passageways that seem to connect multiple cities together. Derinkuyu, Kaymaklı, Özkonak, and others may not have just been separate settlements, but pieces of a unified, subterranean civilization. Some of these tunnels stretch for kilometers, weaving beneath the countryside like veins under skin. Narrow, winding, and often no wider than a man's shoulders, they were likely used for secret movement, escape routes, or even transporting messages and supplies from one underground complex to another. Derinkuyu and Kaymaklı, two of the largest cities, are believed to be linked by such a tunnel, nearly 9 kilometers long. That's not just impressive engineering, it's evidence of coordinated planning on a scale rarely seen in ancient architecture. If true, it means multiple cities could support one another in times of siege or crisis, functioning almost like an underground federation. But these tunnels weren't just for utility, they were also defensive. Built with multiple bottlenecks, blind turns and choke points, they forced any pursuer to enter one at a time, making them easy to trap or ambush. Many tunnels were rigged with trapdoors and stone corks that could be rolled into place to block intruders. Still, the full extent of these networks remains unknown. New passageways are still being discovered. In 2014, an even larger underground complex was accidentally uncovered beneath Nevşehir, possibly dwarfing even Derinkuyu. Archaeologists believe it could contain dozens of levels, aqueducts, places of worship, and countless more tunnels yet to be mapped. What were these tunnels truly for? Were they simple escape routes? or the infrastructure of a society built to live without ever being seen. The more we uncover, the more we realize Cappadocia's underground isn't just a collection of homes and halls. It's a system, planned, connected, hidden beneath our feet for thousands of years. And maybe, just maybe, there's still more waiting to be discovered. Entire cities, buried not by time, but by intention. Because in Cappadocia, the Earth doesn't just hide secrets, it protects them. Despite decades of excavation and study, Cappadocia's underground cities remain wrapped in mystery. The stone walls may be silent, but the questions echo louder than ever. Not just how they were built, but why. And when historical answers fall short, myths and alternative theories rush in to fill the void. One of the most enduring questions is about the true age of these cities. Conventional archaeology ties their major expansion to the Byzantine period, when Christians sought refuge from invading forces. But some researchers believe that the earliest tunnels and chambers are far older, possibly dating back 4,000 years or more. If that's true, what kind of threat existed so long ago that would drive people underground? Enter the theories. Some suggest these subterranean cities were emergency shelters from natural cataclysms, massive floods, solar flares, volcanic winters, or ancient climatic disasters. The layout of the cities, self-sufficient, hidden, and sealed, could be interpreted as long-term survival bunkers, prepared for environmental collapse. Others look to cosmic explanations. Ancient astronaut theorists argue that early civilizations may have built these cities to hide from entities they described as gods, beings who descended from the sky and ruled with fearsome power. Could the underground cities have been a shield from something not of this earth? One local legend speaks of giants that once roamed the surface, driving people below. Others tell of fire from the heavens and enemies that came with burning eyes. To the modern ear, these may sound like metaphors, or memories distorted by centuries of oral tradition. But they hint at something terrifying enough to push entire cultures into the rock. There are also theories tied to the symbolism of the earth itself. In some ancient traditions, descending into the ground represents a journey into the underworld, a metaphorical death and rebirth. Were these cities spiritual sanctuaries, places of ritual transformation? Or were they never abandoned, but forgotten on purpose? The truth is, no single theory explains it all. The scale, the age, the precision, it doesn't fully fit into our existing historical framework. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Because sometimes what lies hidden isn't just history. It's the edge of something we were never meant to understand. Today, visitors to Cappadocia walk through dreamlike landscapes, over valleys carved by wind, past fairy chimneys glowing orange in the evening sun. Hot air balloons drift quietly overhead, but beneath their feet, the ground is hollow. Beneath the beauty lies a world carved in darkness, one still holding its breath after thousands of years. The underground cities are now open to tourists. Visitors descend narrow stairwells, pass through low-arched tunnels, and stand in rooms where people once lived in silence, waiting for danger to pass. And yet, only a fraction has been uncovered. Some chambers remain sealed, some tunnels collapse into shadow, some doorways lead nowhere, or so it seems. These aren't just ruins. They're testaments. Proof that people will do whatever it takes to survive, to protect their children, to preserve their beliefs, to vanish when the world turns hostile. And in that act of vanishing, they left behind a kind of message, not written in language, but in stone. We don't know their names, we don't know their stories, but we know this. They were planners, engineers, visionaries. They created something that could endure centuries of silence, something that might have been meant never to be found. Cappadocia reminds us that history isn't always on the surface. Sometimes, the most profound truths are buried, on purpose, hidden from conquerors, hidden from the curious, hidden, maybe, from time itself. And what remains? Mystery. Mystery in the perfect fit of the rolling stone doors. Mystery in the air shafts that still pull wind from the deep. Mystery in the miles of unexplored tunnels, still untouched, still dark. Maybe the real purpose of Cappadocia's underground world will never be known. Maybe it isn't meant to be. But as you walk through those chambers, with the weight of rock above and the silence pressing in, you feel something ancient stirring. A presence, a whisper, not of fear, but of endurance. Because when the world above was chaos, the people of Cappadocia looked down and chose to survive in the dark, together. And the earth, it seems, has kept their secret well. To the ancient world, sleep was not an escape from reality. It was an entryway into something deeper. Dreams weren't dismissed as random thoughts or figments of imagination. They were taken seriously. In fact, they were considered messages, sometimes warnings, sometimes prophecies, and often direct communications from gods or spirits. For ancient civilizations, the boundary between the physical and spiritual world wasn't sharp. It was porous. And in sleep, that boundary grew thin. The act of dreaming was sacred, mysterious, and often terrifying. It was during those quiet, vulnerable hours of the night that the divine could reach into the human mind. And what it whispered, or roared, could shape the course of a king's decision, a priest's ritual, or a city's fate. In almost every early culture, from the river valleys of Mesopotamia to the temples of Egypt and the academies of Greece, dreams held an elevated status. People believed they were being visited, not by fantasy, but by real forces with real consequences. Dreams could foretell war. They could reveal betrayal. They could offer healing or demand sacrifice. Ignoring a powerful dream wasn't just seen as foolish, it was dangerous. The dreamer, then, was not just a sleeper. They were a messenger, a vessel temporarily opened to cosmic truths. And in some cases, that dreamer became a prophet, chosen by the gods. Entire professions were devoted to understanding dreams. Priests, shamans, oracles, and seers all learned to read the symbols that emerged in the night. A snake in a dream could be a symbol of transformation or a deadly omen. A rising sun could promise victory or deception, depending on the context. Each culture had its own codes, but the belief was universal. Dreams mattered. Even today, fragments of that ancient wisdom linger. We speak of following our dreams, or waking up to a realization. But in the ancient world, dreams weren't poetic expressions. They were maps, warnings, sacred intelligence delivered while the conscious mind slept. This was the world before Freud, before REM cycles, before science tried to measure what the ancients already feared and revered. Because to them, the dream world was real, and to walk through it was to walk with gods. The first civilization to leave written records of dreams were the Sumerians, who lived in Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago. They didn't view dreams as random images. To them, dreams were direct transmissions from the divine, often complex, symbolic, and deeply consequential. Among the ruins of their cities, archaeologists uncovered clay tablets etched with dreams, some personal, others political. Dream interpretation wasn't a novelty, it was a structured practice, taught, studied, and respected. Sumerian kings had court dream interpreters, men trained to decipher the messages of the gods, and whose interpretations could influence the fate of entire cities. One of the most famous examples of this ancient dream culture lies within the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest literary works. In it, both Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu experience vivid, symbolic dreams. Before embarking on their dangerous journey to slay the monster Humbaba, Gilgamesh dreams of celestial battles and collapsing mountains, visions his mother and priests interpret as divine warnings and veiled prophecies. These dreams weren't ignored. They were consulted as sacred guidance. The Sumerians believed that there were two types of dreams, ones sent by gods to help or instruct, and others that were empty, simply echoes of the day. Determining which was which required the wisdom of a priest or diviner, people who could read omens, symbols, and patterns hidden in the imagery of sleep. Temples often had special chambers where priests, or even kings, would sleep in hopes of receiving divine visions. This ritual practice, known later in other cultures as incubation, may have originated with the Sumerians. These sacred dreams were seen as oracles, sometimes even more trusted than waking signs. Dreams could also serve as political tools. A ruler claiming divine dreams could strengthen his legitimacy or justify major decisions. The gods told me in a dream wasn't just spiritual. It was power. In the Sumerian worldview, the universe was alive with meaning, and dreams were its language. Every image, whether a storm, a lion, or a falling star, carried cosmic significance. And in a land where gods walked among men, to dream was to listen. To ignore those dreams was to risk the wrath of the heavens themselves. To the ancient Egyptians, dreams were not just messages. They were portals, pathways to the gods, glimpses into the afterlife, and sometimes instructions for the living. In a culture obsessed with eternity, sleep wasn't merely a time of rest, it was a rehearsal for death, and dreams were communications from the realm beyond. Egyptian texts show that dreams were considered both deeply personal and powerfully prophetic. Like the Sumerians, Egyptians categorized dreams into two kinds: truth dreams, sent by the gods or spirits to guide, heal, or warn, and false dreams which were misleading, or born of bodily imbalance. Temples dedicated to gods like Serapis and Thoth were known to practice dream incubation. Worshippers would sleep within temple walls, hoping to receive divine dreams. These temple dreams were often recorded, interpreted by priests, and even carved into stone. In some cases, a person might receive not just visions, but healing through dreams. One of the most fascinating artifacts is the Ramesside Dream Book, dating to around 1300 BCE. This papyrus scroll is essentially a catalogue of dream symbols and their meanings. It lists over 100 dreams, each paired with an interpretation. For example, if a man sees himself eating crocodile flesh, it means he will gain power over his enemies. Another entry warns that dreaming of drinking warm beer means impending sorrow. These interpretations were taken seriously. Pharaohs, generals, and priests all sought the counsel of dream interpreters, who acted as intermediaries between the dreamer and the divine. Egyptian mythology also linked dreams to the ka, the soul. During sleep, the ka was believed to leave the body and travel to other realms. What it saw there returned as dreams. Sometimes these were visions of loved ones long dead, or encounters with gods bearing messages. Occasionally, dreams were considered visits from malevolent spirits, and protective spells were recited to keep such forces at bay. Even in tomb inscriptions, dreams appear. Kings described how gods came to them in the night, offering divine sanction for their rule or guidance for their legacy. In the land of pyramids and gods, dreams weren't illusions, they were revelations, and to dream was to step briefly into the eternal. In ancient Greece, dreams occupied a space between medicine, mythology, and philosophy. To the Greeks, dreams were more than personal. They were cosmic messages, delivered by gods, heroes, or even forces from the underworld. But unlike earlier civilizations, the Greeks also began to ask why we dream, planting the first seeds of psychological thought. The most sacred place for dream revelation in Greece was the Asclepion, a healing temple dedicated to the god Asclepius, the divine physician. Pilgrims came from across the Mediterranean to sleep inside these sanctuaries in a process called incubation. Before sleeping, they would bathe, fast, pray, and sometimes offer sacrifices, all to prepare their bodies and souls to receive healing dreams. In these dreams, it was said that Asclepius himself would appear, diagnosing their illness or prescribing a cure. sometimes even performing dream surgery. Temple priests, called therapeutai, interpreted the dreams and applied treatments based on what the gods revealed. This blend of medicine and mysticism was highly respected, and it worked, or at least seemed to. The walls of Asclepions were covered in inscriptions thanking the gods for miraculous recoveries. But dreams in Greece were not only for healing, they were political and prophetic too. In Homer's epics, dreams come directly from Zeus. In the Iliad, the god sends a deceptive dream to Agamemnon to influence battle strategy. In the Odyssey, Penelope speaks of two gates of dreams, one of horn, from which true dreams emerge, and one of ivory, from which come lies. Dream interpretation became a respected craft. Philosophers like Aristotle and Heraclitus pondered the nature of dreams, wondering whether they came from divine origins or simply the stirrings of the soul. Meanwhile, Artemidorus of Daldis, a 2nd century dream interpreter, wrote the Oneirocritica, a 5-book manual on how to decode dreams based on profession, gender, status, and symbolism. His work was referenced for centuries. The Greeks believed that during sleep, the soul loosened its grip on the body, floating in a liminal state where it could glimpse deeper truths. Whether sent by gods or born from inner reflection, dreams were never meaningless. To the Greeks, to dream was not just to see visions. It was to momentarily touch the divine mind. In the ancient world, dreams weren't just reflections of the mind. They were often believed to be prophecies. Many civilizations saw the dream state as a space where time unraveled, allowing the future to bleed into the present. To dream was sometimes to witness fate before it arrived, and that knowledge carried both great power and deep responsibility. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, history is filled with rulers, generals, and prophets who acted based on their dreams. One wrong interpretation could cost a kingdom. One correct reading could change the course of history. In Mesopotamia, dreams of celestial omens, falling stars, dark suns, or blood-red rivers were seen as signs of coming war or disaster. Priests kept detailed records of these dreams, looking for patterns that might predict the fate of empires. These records weren't just stored, they were consulted during times of crisis. The Egyptians also viewed dreams as divine warnings. Pharaoh Thutmose IV famously claimed his reign was foretold in a dream, one in which the Sphinx spoke to him, promising kingship if he cleared the desert sand from its body. Whether fact or political storytelling, that dream secured his legitimacy in the eyes of the people. In the Greek world, prophetic dreams played out on the battlefield and in political chambers. Before major decisions, leaders sought omens, either through dream incubation or by consulting oracles like those at Delphi, who often dreamt as part of their rituals. Even Alexander the Great was said to have dreamed of the Egyptian god Serapis before conquering Persia, taking it as a sign of divine favour. But prophecy wasn't only for kings. Everyday people also believed dreams could foretell marriage, childbirth, illness, or death. Artemidorus's Oneirocritica included thousands of such interpretations. Dreaming of losing teeth, a death in the family, dreaming of flight, a sudden change in fortune. The belief in prophetic dreams gave ordinary people a sense of access to the divine, a glimpse into the hidden threads of fate. But it also created anxiety. What if you missed a warning? What if you misunderstood? In a world where gods whispered in dreams, sleeping wasn't just a private act. It was a conversation with destiny. In the ancient world, healing didn't always come from herbs or blades. It often came from dreams. Sacred healing sanctuaries, known as dream temples, existed across many ancient cultures. Here, the sick didn't just seek medicine. They sought divine intervention. And the treatment began not with potions, but with sleep. The most famous of these were the Asclepions in ancient Greece, dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. But this wasn't a Greek invention alone. Earlier civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia also believed that dreams could reveal cures or offer spiritual purification. These temples weren't places to escape illness. They were places to encounter the source of healing often through a divine dream. The process was called incubation. A pilgrim would purify their body through fasting, bathing, or ritual sacrifice before lying down in a sacred chamber, usually at night. The goal was simple but profound: to dream with intent, to open the self to divine contact. In these dreams, gods or spirits would appear, offering advice, cures, or even performing dream surgeries. Some dreamed of snakes coiling around their bodies, sacred symbols of Asclepius. Others saw themselves bathed in light or touched by divine hands. When they awoke, temple priests, trained dream interpreters, would listen, translate, and prescribe actions based on the dream. Sometimes it meant drinking a special brew, walking a certain path, or offering thanks with a sacrifice. In some cases, the dream itself was considered the healing. These temples weren't isolated or fringe. Thousands of people visited them. Inscriptions etched into temple walls speak of miraculous recoveries: blindness cured, fevers broken, pain lifted. Whether the healings were physical, psychosomatic, or spiritual, the power of belief and the dream was undeniable. Dream healing crossed cultures. In Egypt, people visited temples of Serapis or Imhotep, seeking similar nighttime revelations. In Mesopotamia, temples to Gula, the goddess of medicine, offered spaces for dream divination and ritual sleep. What united all these practices was a shared belief. The body and soul were connected, and the soul spoke most clearly in dreams. Healing wasn't just about the flesh. It was about harmony between the human and the divine. In these sanctuaries of silence, dreams weren't just seen as stories. They were medicine. In the ancient world, the realm of dreams was not only a place of prophecy or healing, it was also a space where the dead could speak. Many ancient civilizations believed that dreams provided a rare and sacred moment when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. To dream of a departed loved one was not seen as a simple expression of grief or memory. It was often believed that the spirit of the deceased had truly returned, bearing messages, warnings, or unresolved requests. These dream encounters were powerful, emotional, and deeply significant. In Egypt, where the afterlife was central to belief, dreams were thought to offer a direct link to the underworld. The soul, or Ka, was believed to travel freely during sleep, even visiting the dead. If a deceased family member appeared in a dream, it could mean they were displeased, in need of offerings, or simply reaching out with guidance. Egyptians sometimes wrote letters to the dead, left in tombs or shrines, asking for protection or help, hoping the request would be answered in a dream. In Mesopotamia, dream encounters with the dead were treated with reverence and caution. The dead were believed to retain power in the afterlife, and a dream visitation could be a sign that something was amiss, perhaps a neglected burial ritual or an unfulfilled vow. These dreams were often followed by ritual purification or offerings to set things right. The Greeks also took dreams of the dead seriously. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus descends into the underworld and speaks with the spirits of the fallen, a vision that mirrors what many believed could happen during sleep. The philosopher Heraclitus once said, "The waking have one world in common, but the sleeping turn aside each into a world of his own." That private world was where the dead could slip through. Even beyond Europe and the Middle East, many cultures held similar views, that the dead were not entirely gone and that dreams were their language. When the voice of a lost parent or child spoke in the night, it wasn't poetic, it was real. To the ancients, sleep was not a place to forget. It was where the past could still reach out, and sometimes ask to be remembered. To ancient civilizations, dreams weren't just messages, they were puzzles. Rich with symbols, strange creatures, impossible events, and celestial signs, dreams were believed to carry coded language from the divine. Interpreting them wasn't easy. It required training, intuition, and often ritual. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, Professional dream interpreters operated almost like priests or shamans. They studied vast collections of dream records, memorized symbol meanings, and knew how to distinguish between a true dream and a meaningless one. Their interpretations could influence public policy, medicine, and even warfare. Across cultures, certain dream symbols appeared again and again, and they were rarely literal. A snake might mean danger in one dream, transformation in another. Seeing fire could be a warning of destruction or purification. Flying might symbolize the soul breaking free of earthly burdens, or a longing to escape something in waking life. In Egypt, dream books outlined hundreds of these symbols. Dreaming of drowning might signal an emotional storm to come. Seeing oneself blind could foretell a spiritual awakening, or a painful truth hidden in plain sight. These were not guesses. They were part of a vast, ancient language of symbols, refined over generations. In Greece, Artemidorus of Daldis compiled the Oneirocritica, a 5-volume manual of dream analysis. He emphasized that dream interpretation wasn't universal. Context mattered. A farmer dreaming of a flood meant something very different than a sailor dreaming the same. The Oneirocritica is one of the earliest known texts to suggest that personal experience shapes dream meaning, a remarkably modern idea for the 2nd century. Dream interpretation was also tied to divination. Dreams were seen as one thread in a web of omens, signs, and sacred messages. Dreamers might consult oracles, draw lots, or perform ritual offerings to clarify what they had seen. Some even kept dream journals, inscribed on papyrus or clay, not just for personal insight, but to share with their community. For ancient people, symbols weren't just subconscious images. They were keys, part of a divine language whispered in sleep. And understanding that language meant unlocking the will of the gods, the forces of fate, and the secrets of the soul. To the ancients, a dream wasn't just a story. It was a message in code, sent from the stars. Today, we often treat dreams as fleeting fragments, strange images quickly forgotten after we wake, or at best, material for therapists and artists. But to the ancients, dreams were far more than mental noise. They were sacred, structured, and respected. They offered guidance, healing, connection with the dead, and glimpses of the divine. Dreams were a part of the fabric of life, woven into medicine, religion, and governance. So what happened? As science and rationalism rose, particularly in the post-Enlightenment West, dreams were reclassified. No longer messages from the gods, they became neurological byproducts, electrical impulses, memory fragments, or emotional processing. The sacred became clinical. The symbolic was reduced to chemical. But even now, in moments of grief, change, or deep intuition, dreams still matter. We still search them for meaning. A dream of a lost loved one can bring closure. A recurring nightmare can reflect stress or a truth we don't want to face. Modern psychology, beginning with Freud and Jung, tried to reclaim some of that ancient understanding, recognizing that dreams hold power, even if we no longer call it divine. What the ancients understood is that the dream world is not separate from life. It is a mirror reflecting not only our fears and desires, but something bigger, something eternal. Whether it was a god speaking from the darkness, a warning about tomorrow's storm, or the voice of a parent long buried, dreams offered something society could not provide during waking hours. A conversation with the unknown. And maybe that's what we've lost. The humility to listen to what sleep might be trying to tell us. Across time and civilization, one belief remained constant. Dreams are not random. They are doors. And the question isn't whether they're real, it's whether we're willing to walk through them. In every ancient temple, every scroll and tablet, we hear the same whisper: pay attention. Close your eyes, not to forget the world, but to understand it. Because in the silence of night, when the noise of the world fades, we might just hear what the Sumerians Egyptians and Greeks already knew. That dreams are not echoes of the mind. They are the language of the soul.